Okay, just a quick update to the audience. We know that you can see and hear us, but the audience is not seen or heard. We're getting a few questions in the chat. And so just to let everybody know, this is a webinar series, and so only the speakers here are visible. So I think we'll begin here. So hello and welcome to our series on confronting racism, discrimination, and othering, perspectives from around the world. I'm Dr. Maria Nardone, Director of Technology and Global Learning at the William Alanson White Institute of Psychoanalysis, Psychiatry, and Psychology. We are very happy that you are joining us today to hear from our guest, Dr. NAHALEH MOSHTAGH. The title of her talk is Being Bad Enough, The Untold Story of Women in Iran. I would like to extend a special welcome to our participants from around the globe. They are from Iran, Japan, China, Russia, Belarus, Canada, Greece, Turkey, Israel, Germany, other countries in Europe, Albania, and of course, many states in the United States. I want to thank everyone who submitted questions for our speakers via email in advance. We will try to address as many as possible. During our meeting, you may also add questions today in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I will introduce our moderator today, my colleague, Dr. Gurmeet Kanwal, who will then introduce Dr. MOSHTAGH. So Dr. Gurmeet Kanwal is Clinical Associate Professor of Psychiatry at Weill Cornell College of Medicine and Supervising Psychoanalyst at the William Alanson White Institute. He is past president of the William Alanson White Psychoanalytic Society and an editorial board member and fellow of the College of International Journal of Psychoanalysis and editorial board member of the Psychoanalytic Discourse. Dr. Kanwal is co-editor with Salman Akhtar of the books Bereavement, Personal Experiences and Clinical Reflections by Karnak, 2017, and Intimacy, Clinical, Cultural, Digital, and Developmental Perspectives, Routledge, 2019. His papers have been published in Contemporary Psychoanalysis, Neuropsychoanalysis, Psychoanalytic Review, and Psychoanalysis, Culture, and Society. In addition to teaching in the United States, Dr. Kanwal has lectured on psychoanalysis in India and Iran. Gurmeet?
Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you. Okay. So good morning, good evening, good day, depending on wherever you are in the world. Barze salam, Moshtagh didare shoma, Dr. MOSHTAGH. That's as far as the Farsi goes.
Someone has been practicing. Okay.
And special salam to our Iranian audience. And I want to thank and welcome Dr. Bill Glover, President of APSA, and Dr. Harriet Wolf, President of IPA, for being present for this talk. The purpose of this series has been to bring marginalized voices of communities, people, and countries to the consciousness of our field of psychology and psychoanalysis. We are here to use our knowledge to understand something about the phenomena of prejudice, othering, and racism. But even more importantly, we are here to listen to the voices of those who are marginalized and oppressed so that we can understand what has been missing and wrong in our field. Why has psychology and psychoanalysis had such a hard time being inclusive and woke in its theory and practice? You see, marginalization and oppression and silencing don't just happen randomly. They are brought about consciously, intentionally, and strategically by those in power to maintain their status quo, whether in interpersonal relationships or in political and international ones. This is true all over the world. It is true here in the US. It's also true for our field of psychoanalysis. Our goal with this series is to become aware of the workings of those power structures within and without by letting the marginalized voices speak on this stage, whether they are those of Muslims and Buddhists in China, or African Americans and First Nations in the Americas, or those of women in Iran. It has been gratifying to see that so many people have an interest in this issue. We have now started to get requests from people around the world on behalf of communities that would like to have their voices heard in this forum. And we invite you all to be in touch with us if you think we should be attending to a particular issue or region or community. In thinking about today's talk, I'd like to point out some of the events in US-Iran relations that make up the historical context and complexity of women living today under the Islamic Republic. For example, it is important to remember that in 1953, it was US and British intelligence that helped to overthrow a democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad MOSHTAGH, to replace him with the West-friendly Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. By 1954, US and UK had acquired 40% ownership of the oil industry in Iran. In 1957, it was the US who provided nuclear training and technology and then a nuclear reactor to Iran under the Atoms for Peace policy of Eisenhower. During the 1970s, Andy Warhol went to Tehran to paint a portrait of the Empress, and Elizabeth Taylor visited, being photographed drinking vodka and caviar. Even after the 1979 Islamic Revolution and the hostage crisis, we had the unfolding of the Iran-Contra affair, where US was caught selling weapons to the Islamic Republic regime and using the money to fund right-wing Contra rebels in Nicaragua. Yet, following 9/11/2001, we had President Bush declare Iran an axis of evil. And then we had Trump demonizing it further with more sanctions and a Muslim ban. It has been a complex history. It so happens that I was in the streets of Tehran talking to a shopkeeper the day Trump got elected as our president. The shopkeeper I was chatting with heard the news as well and laughed out loud with an affectionate, "I'm sorry for you" expression, and said to me, "Now it is your turn to have Ahmadinejad as your president."
Oh, that was something else. Yes.
It's easy to demonize countries, and once demonized and dehumanized, it is easy to impose sanctions that leave people without food, children without medicines, and women without the economic choices needed to improve their lives, because they become invisible to us, and their voices are no longer human voices. In that context, I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. NAHALEH MOSHTAGH to help us hear the voices of women in Iran. Dr. MOSHTAGH is a psychoanalyst and clinical psychologist originally from Tehran and currently residing in Toronto, Canada. She is one of the founding members and the director of Hamava Institute for Psychoanalytic Psychotherapy in Tehran. She is a graduate of Iran University of Medical Sciences and Chicago Psychoanalytic Institute and a member of APSA and IPA. She is the editor-in-chief of the journal Psychoanalytic Discourse. She's the translator and the Farsi editor of Sandler, Dare, and Holder's The Patient and the Analyst, Adam Phillips' Winnicott, and Darian Leader's What is Madness? She has published papers in JAPA, in Psychoanalytic Review, Modern Psychoanalysis, International Forum of Psychoanalysis, and Psychoanalytic Discourse. Today's talk, Being Bad Enough, is also a paper she's currently working on for publication. Dr. MOSHTAGH has been championing the cause of women in psychoanalysis through teaching, supervising, and mentoring young women therapists and helping them to find their unique voices while working within an anti-feminist sociopolitical environment. She has started a first-of-its-kind two-year program on women's studies and psychoanalysis at Hamava Institute in Tehran. And with that, I welcome Dr. MOSHTAGH, and I'll hand it over to you now.
Thank you. Hello to everyone. And first of all, I'm grateful to Maria and Gurmeet and all the other Technology and Global Learning Committee members. I do think that this global conference is unique in its mission, and I want to express my heartfelt thank you to all of you for doing this. because giving voice to people who have remained unheard is the best way to heal the wounds that were created by discrimination and othering all along the way. I'm truly honored to be here and have this opportunity to talk about women in Iran, which is a very complicated topic, actually, to talk about and to do justice. And so I just share with you my thoughts, and then we'll take it from there. So, so I need to share some slides with you. Okay, now you're seeing my slides, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so let me make them. Okay. So, I decided to start with a simple map to introduce my country. This is Iran in the Middle East with all the neighboring countries. And one thing that I want to emphasize for some of our audience still pronounce the name of this country, our country, as Iran, which is for some reason has become, kind of nerve-wracking over the years. And I want to emphasize the correct pronunciation is Iran. And so Iran is this cat-like country in the Middle East, in this strategic location that you can see.
Really at the center, it seems like, between Africa, Asia, and Europe. Very multicultural, I would imagine, influence from all those.
Yeah, and the location itself has been a blessing and a curse at the same time, when it came to the policy making and international affairs and complicated stuff like that. So the next thing that I want to emphasize is that Iran is not a homogeneous country in terms of people and cultures and subcultures. You see, this is the map of ethnic groups in Iran. We don't have different races, but we have different ethnic groups. And so all these different ethnic groups, as you can see in this map, they are all Iranians. We have like shared cultural values, and the language, the formal official language of the country is Persian, which is the language that's spoken like in this part of the country, as you see. And since the capital also is Persian, so like the language of education and the formal language of people is Persian. But we have Lurs, we have Turks, we have Kurds, Baluch, different ethnicities that like some of them, like Turks, they have their own language. And some others, you can recognize Persian spoken in different accents. But I mean, like overall, it's a very important point to remember while we're talking, especially when we want to talk about women, that there are different subcultures here, and these different subcultures have a slightly different, and sometimes not that slightly, but different measures and traditions and values, and different things can happen. Like, for example, most of the honor killings of women happens around this area in the west of Iran mostly. So I mean, or in the south of Iran, there is a small region in which women were required until recently to wear the face veil. But then the rest of the country did not go through wearing the face veil, like, so women didn't do that. But it's worth keeping in mind that we are not talking about a homogeneous group.
Amazing.
And that's part of the difficulty of coming up with some kind of a formulation that do justice to all this different groups and different value systems, I can say, that coexist in Iran. So this is, you see, I was in Iran when I saw this image, and this was CNN reporter Becky Anderson reporting on Iranian presidential election. I think it was it must have been Rouhani, because you know, after Rouhani, I left Iran. And I remember that I saw this image, and it was so uneasy and so, you know, difficult to get along with, because this is what American media, and I suppose maybe international media, is constructing out of a very heterogeneous group of women. And this shows us a group of Islamic women in Islamic, wearing Islamic chador and waiting in line to vote, to participate in the election, presidential election. And so they must be in line with Islamic Republic or with the regime. And that's about it. And so now I want to talk about the title of my talk. Like, why did I want to talk about the untold stories? Because I do believe that there are untold stories. You see, this is not our story. Not that there's anything wrong with this image. No, this is part of the population. This is part of the group of women. They have their own values. They have their own struggle with patriarchy. You know, I will get to that. But why did I want to emphasize on the untold stories? Because I want us to be aware that this is not the image. You see who we are missing in this image, like women, like these two gorgeous,
what a contrast,
energetic, gorgeous, modern, smart, you know, like I can go on forever with this image. You see, like, this is the thing that is missing in Becky Anderson's report and other reporters' report. These are my tribe, you know. This is the untold story. Or this one. You see, like, I'm not sure if people know enough about this group of women, you know, who are not wearing hijab. Still, they have to, you know, carry compulsory hijab, but they're not wearing chador. They don't look religious. They don't look, you know, that repressed or inhibited or whatever, you know. They look energetic and alive and all the good things.
This is so interesting, because this was exactly one of my experiences when I was in Tehran giving the talk. You had invited me to that. I mean, it is amazing to actually go there and encounter, you know, this side of women. Yeah, you don't. I mean, having been in the US all these years, this would not be the image I would be carrying in my head.
I know. And you see, like, I've been, as you know, I've been in distance training for psychoanalysis. And I had some pretty interesting encounters with some of the instructors. Like, someone, like, I heard from a supervisor that one instructor was so thrilled to see that I was, quote unquote, not wrapped in Oh, so she's from Iran and she's not wrapped in, scarf and stuff. You see, so, or before going to Chicago Psychoanalytic, I was in training in another psychoanalytic institute. And this happened there that one of the instructors asked me, and you see, being a distance, it's like I'm big up. I could imagine that my image is on the wall. And so she asked, like she was talking about, for some reason, she was talking about the effects of ultrasound on pregnant women. And then she looked up and she said, she asked me, Dr. MOSHTAGH, do you guys have ultrasound in Iran? And I was this close to say that, no, I'm talking to you from a high-tech tent. You see, like we don't have anything, we haven't heard about anything around ultrasound or whatever. So that's the general image. Or this is the image that you see, like I'm going to talk about bad enoughness and being bad and many other troubles. And these are women who recently, like in the past couple of years, they objected to compulsory hijab and in the streets of Tehran. And these are their scarves. And it was supposed to be a white scarf as a symbol of we're not fighting, you see, but I'm gonna stand up there and I'm gonna show my scarves. You don't want to know what happened to these women afterwards, but I can tell you that what happened to this stance, you see that they made it after this protest was spreading. So they changed it and they made it to a triangle so no one could stand on it.
Oh, wow.
You see. So, okay. First of all, I recommend this book to anyone who is interested in the life and stories of women in Iran. This is a brilliant book by Hamideh Sedghi, one of our brilliant scholars. And she shows in this book how women have been the staging ground for men's politics all along the history. And you see these images here. These are related to the subtitle of the book, Veiling, Unveiling, and Reveiling. When she's talking about veiling, compulsory veiling that happened early 20th century, and then unveiling, which was again compulsory, that happened in 1936. And then reveiling, the famous reveiling that everyone knows these days, happening with the Islamic Republic in 1979. So if anyone is interested in like learning more about Iranian history and how women were located at the heart of the politics in Iran, this book is worth taking a look at. So let me start with Qajar dynasty. So I'm gonna go briefly over the history because I want everyone to have a background, because if we don't have this background and this context, then we don't know how to place things. So it's important for me to locate everything in the proper context and in the historical story. So this is the first veiling phase during Qajar dynasty, and it happened at the outset of the 20th century. And this was what women were supposed to wear. So this is the famous chador, which covers everything from head to toe. And this is burqa rubande, which was supposed to, cover the whole face. And behind this, if I couldn't find a better picture, but behind this, if you use your imagination, because you can't see, but there is these big trousers, big loose trousers that were called chakchur. So if God forbid, out of a wind or something, the chador would move, then all you could see was chakchur, which was this big trousers. So that was the way that a woman's body was supposed to be covered and not seen, and everything. So you got this picture? You're with me? Okay.
Yeah.
So fasten your seatbelt, because look what happens then here. That one of the, and I'm using this as an example. I'm getting back to this. We're gonna use this to understand what is going on with women today. But then you see a Qajar prince in his Ta'dibul Niswan means disciplining women. So he instructs women in bed, put aside all bashfulness and innocence. Move without shame and embarrassment. Do not think it exceeds your fame and reputation. If you do, what is your status then? So in other words, look like this in public, be a slut in bed. We get back to that point.
Great.
So, but then, okay, so as I'm talking about all the oppressive forces and all the events that happened in the history, I want to also emphasize the role of women who pushed back. So we know that in constitutional revolution, which as a nation we are very proud of, but we of course lost all the privileges of it, that happened in 1905, many women were in the streets of Tehran. They took off their veils and they were like shouted, and they had slogans that long live freedom, we must live the way we want. Okay, so this is the picture I could find in Google, but then I noticed that this image is used for different times of the history. So maybe this is not accurate in terms of historical data of it, but I think it's safe to imagine a group of women like these women who were actively involved in constitutional revolution, to the point that William Morgan Shuster, who was back then in Iran and who was working in Iran, he wrote, "Women incorporated feminism into nationalism and anti-imperialism. Iranian women became almost at a bound the most progressive, not to say radical, in the world." And I'm talking about 1906, which is, huge. You can imagine the significance of it, right? And this was the first time that we, as a nation, we could get to some democracy, some level of it. I don't know. Are you? I know that you're into history, but are you familiar with this part of the Iranian history?
Not so much, not at all. But it's interesting that at this point it seems that feminism may almost have been further along even than in the West in 1905.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I could brag about us being so further ahead, you see, in many things, including science, including psychology, including many things. But then that's the politics of the world. And, we are in Middle East, and we had oil, and we had like incapable dynasties and states and stuff. So we don't get to that. Coming back to talking about women. So this is the status of women around constitutional revolution. And this is what an American observed with Iranian women. But women's education were banned, They believe that, and that was like, just wait a minute, just think about this rationale behind this, that they believe that educated women, if women get education, then that would threaten the whole morality of the society. Why? Because when women learn the art of writing, they would write love letters. And you see, I was reading it as I was making the PowerPoint and preparing myself. I was like, oh, seriously, writing love letters to whom exactly? Like, how entitled you could feel that, oh, women would get education, and the only use of their education would be writing to love letters to us, men. Like, oh, okay. So, but then this woman, and by the way, she is my many adopted grandmothers. Like I have two biological grandmothers, but many adopted grandmothers. So she's one of my adopted grandmothers, Azmude. That she's the first Iranian woman who started a school for girls. And interestingly, she named the school as Namus, which is honor. And the school started in 1907. And she was smart enough to include Quran as part of the curriculum. Because you see, like before this, women were not allowed, as I mentioned, to get education, but there were some tutorial lessons going on. So there were literate women, if they were coming from higher class families and if they could afford having tutors. And so they could learn, like, reading, writing, Arabic. And this woman knew Persian, Arabic, French. Like, she was a literate, smart woman. And so the only way she found which worked actually was to include Quran in the curriculum. And then she started with a handful of students, and then she trained, like, from the students, then she trained the teachers. So then this is the image that's available on Google from the Honor Namus School in Tehran in 1907. So that was Qajar dynasty. And the next stop in the train of history is Reza Shah and women. So everyone, maybe I assume that people have heard about Reza Shah. Reza Shah was like the prototype of a patriarchal man. He was illiterate himself. He found his way up to establishing a monarchy, and he did a lot of service to Iran as a country, to people as a nation. But one of the steps that he took was that he enforced unveiling in 1936. And it happened after he traveled to Turkey. He was inspired by Kemal Atatürk in Turkey and by Afghanistan's king. I'm blocking that name for some reason. Let's just go on. But I know that Reza Shah was inspired by what was happening in Turkey and Afghanistan. And then so he in his attempt to modernize and westernize Iran, and in an attempt to castrate the clergy and like the whole religious establishment, he enforced unveiling in 1936. And this is the image. You can look at Google. There are different images, and that shows that he is standing there, and there are lines of women and wearing things like this. Not like he hated.
They're wearing hats instead of hijab.
Exactly. He hated chador, and like that was out in the open, the level of the intensity of hate that he had for all the covering ups of religious groups and stuff. So the unveiling was enforced in 1936. So some people talk about Reza Shah doing, helping with emancipation of women by enforcing the unveiling. But of course, so many are don't believe that is true, because when it's forced, it doesn't matter whether it's veiling or unveiling. It's like the effect and the communication is the same. But then something worth mentioning happened during Reza Shah, which I think maybe was the real emancipation of women. That look at the states and the number of educated women. In 1910, there were 167 girls enrolled at 50 private schools, and then this number raised to 11,489. Studied at 190 schools, and by 1933, 50,000 female students. Wow. which is, I mean, like something worth considering. So, and then in 1979, Islamic Revolution happened. And so there were some, reforms in the law, family law, that concerned women. Of course, after Reza Shah, his son, Mohammad Reza, he gave vote rights to women, which, it wasn't like we didn't fight for it with it wasn't like he gave it, as part of the modernization, and he made some changes in some rules, and like overall were better days. Like he wasn't into veil thing of enforcing veiling or unveiling or anything. So anyway, and then the Islamic Republic happened, which of course then we can talk about many things, many layers of the Islamic Republic. But something that I want to emphasize is that for the Islamic Republic to happen, different groups with political ideas and ideologies gathered together in Iran. And Tahireh Moghisi is a sociologist here in Canada at York University, and she has a brilliant book about how leftists and Islamic people, Islamic groups gathered together, how they had one common thread, and that was hating women. And that was why, like they were against each other on many different levels. But then when it came to women, women, just like constitutional revolution, in the Islamic Revolution also women were very active. Like they were educated women, leftist women, they were doing the work, they were on the streets, they were, doing everything they could along with men. And then when the revolution actually happened and Ayatollah Khomeini declared victory, and then the next thing that happened was that like women were forgotten all over again, and then they were veiled, and then like all the rest of the story that I will get to it.
So this is the veiling now after the forced unveiling, then this is the forced veiling.
Yes, this is the forced veiling now. And currently, so this, of course, it's not limited to veiling. It affects the laws and regulations, and so I thought I can talk about some of the laws and regulations that Iranian women are living under in Islamic Republic. So let me stop share. And then give me a minute. Okay. So, okay, let's get back to the laws. So as we're talking, Iranian women don't have the right for divorce. We can't file for divorce unless the husband is like mentally ill or addict, or some serious problems. If a woman can prove that a physical abuse, a chronic physical abuse has been going on and stuff like that. I mean, for a woman to file a divorce, like there is no such a thing to file for divorce for I'm not happy with this person, like you should have been beaten up, or like something crazy must happen.
So irreconcilable differences is not enough.
No. Not at all. No, irreconcilable. No, the thing that you said, I can't even repeat it. We don't have it in our repertoire. So so that's part of the thing. And one other interesting law that is going on as we're talking is that the full name of mothers is not recorded in children's birth certificate. So in other words, like my son can be the son of any NAHALEH, but of course he cannot be the son of any father. Like that part is well taken care of in the birth certificate. But when it comes to women, like the first name is recorded and that's it. And recently I was reading in Twitter that in Afghanistan, because Afghani women had the same issue, and they had an active protest, and they could reverse this and they could put their full name in the children's birth certificates, but it's not. It hasn't happened in Iran yet. So and then there are other things, of course, that you see, like why am I talking about the laws? Because these laws represent the worldview, represent the way that this Islamic patriarchy has been treating women and is looking at women at this point. So like a woman gets half of the inheritance, like her brother gets twice from what she gets. And another interesting thing is that, a woman's blood money is half of the man's blood money. So if you're driving and if you happen to have a crash and, to kill someone, you can pray to kill a woman, because then the blood money is half, it costs you less.
By blood money, you mean the money the compensation that someone would get for having killed the woman is half?
Yes. And you see, thanks to social media, in this past couple of years, we got the news of some honor killing, there were honor killings going on. There were, so many other stuff. And with the honor killings, what if the father kills the daughter, then the maximum sentence he gets is like a couple of years maximum. So I mean, these are just some examples of what is actually going on in the society. But then, if you're good with that, then I can get to the next level.
Absolutely, sure.
Okay. So another untold part of the story is that while this is going on in the larger context of the society, we cannot easily assume that exactly the same thing is happening in the family and in the household, because the state of affairs is a bit different when it comes to the family dynamics and inside of the household. So I was talking about this phenomena that woman's name is kind of being erased in the larger context. And in that line, I want to emphasize that there was a tradition. It's not practiced like that these days in modern times, but I remember like my grandmother, who would be called by my grandfather with her first son's name, not by her own name. And like husbands would not call their wives by their first name. They would usually call them by the first son name, or they would call them manzil, which means home. Nowadays, husbands may call their wives, especially if there are other men around, they would say like my Mrs. Khanumam. It's not that. So there is something around the name of the woman, and I want to emphasize that, because then I think something else happens inside the family.
So it's linked to a form of erasure in some sense, this whole thing about what is done with the names of women.
That's my understanding. At least there is an attempt to erasure of the names of women, but then in the family, so to get into the dynamics of the family, I just want to propose like some hypothetical family. Let's think of a hypothetical family with a man and a woman and some children, or not even children yet. A man and a woman, like they get married, and then they start this bond, they start this unit that's called family. So this man is being taught and fed patriarchy, right? And in patriarchy, like he's heard and he's breathed, he's eaten, he's drunk with all these ideas about women, that women are defective in their minds, they are half humans, they just complain, they're crazy minded, they're all these things that, there are so many. I can give you countless of proverbs, expressions, stories, folk tales, poems about all around this line. Okay, so this man is like with this idea getting married to a woman. So of course we cannot expect, or we cannot anticipate something along the line of intimacy or emotional closeness and all of this stuff happening, right? So like what is usually happen is that Iranian men are either emotionally unavailable or emotionally unskillful in making a true partnership with their wives. So they remain, when it comes to the inside the household affairs, so they do implement some powers, like they do implement they do set the rules, some general framework of what should and should not be done, what is or is not tolerable in this household. But then when it gets to emotional engagement with the family system, then they are like not interested and distant and all of that. And to be fair, like we should also consider the weight that patriarchy puts on women, on men's shoulders to be the sole provider or the main provider. So, I mean, the combination of all of this makes this distance in the relationship between man and woman. And so even before bringing children to the equation, I want to emphasize that class matters here. Class matters a lot. So if a woman is coming from a higher class family, if she's bringing a good dowry, if she's having some sort of a financial backup through her family and her father and whatever, if she has inherited some good money or whatever, it's easier for her to negotiate her rights inside the household. Okay, so that is always the case. Like this intersectionality of class and gender, it's always at play. But then let's consider some ordinary working class family that they get together. So what happens next is that, the woman, of course, pushes back and resists the erasure of her name. But what comes to her help is having children, right? Like when a woman has children, and especially if she has boys, her status, power. Yeah, her status kind of changes. She's in a different position. And something that happens usually in the Iranian households is that because the father is like the main ruler, or it's like into should and shouldn'ts and all kind of that stuff, and it's not into emotional engagement and emotional intimacy, then mother has some field, some relational field, if I say, or some opportunities to make a strong bond with the children. So I call this a strong bond a hyper bond. And you see, like I know that some of our audience are not with psychoanalytic background, but for those who are coming from a psychoanalytic background, I just need to remind them of what Laplanche says about children being preoccupied and always having this question in mind that what does this breast want from me? So there's always this thing in children's minds that what does my mother want from me? And children being children and loving their mothers and, like being in this state of just pure sheer love for mother. So of course they give their mother what their mother wants. And what does mother want? The mother wants allies. The mother wants recognition. The mother wants to have a place. The mother wants to be seen. The mother wants to be heard. The mother wants to establish something. And because the love of the mother is a valuable currency, children cannot afford to lose it. And they love their mother anyway. So this hyperbond shapes in the family system. So you don't come across as, although like women for several years, this one I forgot to mention, good that I remembered, that they would be called by their husbands as weakling or zaife, right? Like all these words have like some, a load into them. So although she might be erased in the outside, or might be called zaife, might be considered as not worthy of being a thought partner or whatever, like that is the state of affair with the husband, but the state of affair with children is totally different. And so mother has a chance to establish something that I call the name of the mother in the house. And I'm paraphrasing or using Lacan's famous notion of the name of the father, which is about, the strict no of the culture. When the culture says no, instinct, like you cannot sleep with your mother, you cannot, there are some strict rules on some of these things, and Lacan gathers them under the name of the father. So using that and thinking in that line, I assume that what happens in the household is establishing a name of the mother, which is some hyper emotional bond between children and mother in alliance against the patriarchal father, and in an attempt to make the mother feel better or lift her up or give her respect, and that actually works, that is a successful strategy, you see. So with the establishment of that hyper bond with children, now again we should think about this mother who has established this bond with the children. What are the value systems that she's carrying in her head? Of course, the value systems that the mother is carrying in her head is patriarchal value system, because she was raised, like the man, was raised and fed and bred patriarchy, right? So mother has all these patriarchal values in her mind. And the main thing that, to me at least, the main thing that defines the whole value system is this concept, this umbrella term that we call it a good woman. A good woman is something that any woman is striving to be, has to strive to be. Like, this is something that no woman wants to be bad. And this is when the other part of the title of my talk comes into the whole discussion, when I get to badness. So establishing what I mean by a good woman is the first step, because the concept of bad enough rests on it, you see. So what is a good woman? A good woman in the Islamic patriarchal system, it has this, I think, like a definition that we can articulate. We can think about the definition. There is a stable core to it, and there is a flexible shell. The stable core remains the same in the whole, like different subcultures, different, parts of the country. And then like the flexible shell can be a little bit here or there, different maybe. But a good woman is a woman whose sexuality is owned and whose aggression is oppressed and silenced.
You're making a distinction between owned and oppressed?
I'm making a distinction between owned and oppressed and repressed. You see, because like at the manifest level, when you look at all this veiling on veiling, veiling on veiling, and then women should cover themselves and women should not be seen and this could easily lead to this idea that, okay, so women's sexuality is repressed. But the thing is, and this is the twist of this whole thing, and this is when then Ta'dibul Niswan, or disciplining women, the quote that I had, comes in handy, that you see in Islamic patriarchal value system, if a woman has a repressed sexuality, then that woman is a useless woman. Is not a good woman. So you see, a woman should be sexually active, should be usable sexually, and should not be, as we read there, should not be embarrassed in bed, should not be bashful, should not shy away from sex. In other words, if the sexuality is repressed, that woman has no value in the whole system. So what is the meaning of veiling, what to wear, what to do? All of that, it's that I own your sexuality. Not that you shouldn't be sexually active, not that you shouldn't be a slut, but you should be a slut when I want to, the way I want to, where I want to. This is like, by I mean, of course, patriarchy. I'm giving voice to patriarchy, which is that, okay, so be a slut, like basically Islamic patriarchy looks at women as sexual objects ever since they get their first periods. You see, so it's like, okay, so the whole discussion is going on about child marriage, and you see, what is the appropriate age for the girl to get married? Because in this mindset, it's like, okay, you got your period, you're ready to be a slut. Okay, so we can get into trade, we can give you to some, to the next tribe, we can deal something with you, we can play sexually with you, we can do all of that things. Okay, so the sexuality is not repressed, it's owned, and it's not oppressed. But then this thing happens for women that they don't think that they can own their sexuality. Like you can be sexually active, but then the ownership of this sexually active activity is with patriarchy or the system and the whole thing. Okay, but the main problem is around women's aggression, and I'm using aggression as an umbrella term, you see, and let's put assertiveness, goal setting, finding your voice, like making a decision, implementing a change. Let's put all of that under this umbrella, because for doing any of that, you need some level of aggression. You need to be able to recognize some problem, and then you need to be able to articulate the problem. And then after articulation, you need to be able to do something about it, or to talk about it at least, you see? And that is exactly the point when the oppression arrives. Okay, so silencing the aggression is the main mechanism that has been operating all along. So you can be sexually active if you follow my rules, if you do it the way I want to, but you cannot, and I repeat, you cannot, under any circumstances, open your mouth, talk, speak your mind, talk about your ideas, make a decision, implement a change, whatever that we call like finding someone's voice. You cannot do that. That part is oppressed. And that is the borderline, actually. Like that is when, if so far a woman has been good, then if you cross that, then you can be easily named, labeled as a bad woman. You're a bad woman, and you have to face some consequences. Okay, so now let's get back to our hypothetical family system and our hypothetical mother. So you see the mother, after having established this relationship and bond with the children, how does she use it? She uses it to find some margin of having a voice, of making some decision, of implementing some change, and all of that. In other words, like she uses all the power to have some margin in which she can move, she can be a human. But then to have that, she has to go through this long day-to-day, sometimes, process of negotiating with patriarchy, What can I give and what can I take? You know, if I do this, if I say this at this time of the day, or if I like phrase my sentence or my wordings or my request in this particular type, or if I insist, or if I pick a fight, or what should I do to be able to get what I want, and how much of what I want I can get. Okay, so that becomes the constant negotiation. And so when the negotiation comes in the picture, which has always come, then we are in the sphere of bad enough. Then for each woman, depending on which family she's coming from, depending on what kind of a character she came to be, what kinds of goals she has, what kinds of consequences she's able to bear, then the margin of bad enough can be different. For some, maybe it's very small. For some, like they have the power somehow to push it to a larger extent. So you see, being bad enough has been the state of affair for all these years. And all, if you ask me, I think all women in their own ways, whether the one who goes to the street and puts the scarf off, or the one who is staying home with her kids and husband, and still like on a day-to-day basis gets into this negotiation with a whole patriarchal mindset to get something. In all along, they are being in a different points of bad enoughness, you know? So being bad enough is the state of affair, but then it has been a blessing, but it has also been a curse. You see,
so being bad enough is on the one hand, it is the attempt of the woman to find some kind of gratification, satisfaction, recognition,
yes, voice, right. And
then it is also a curse in what
agency. You know why it's a curse? Because when you start negotiating with your prisoner, then you always end up in the prison, you know? So you may get some extra stuff that other prisoners don't get, you see? And then you can get comfortable in it. And so that's how it has become a curse, because you see, and then of course, like getting out of the prison, if we want to stick with this metaphor, then getting out of the prison potentially can have a lot of consequences. Like it can cost you a lot, sometimes even your life. So it's quite understandable for many women to find some comfort in their own bad enough territory, you know. But then when it, you know, the way that it has transmitted from generation to generation, then it has contributed to the establishment of patriarchy.
So, and because we're going to run out of time in 5-6 minutes, I was wondering if you can say something about, you know, this whole notion that often exists in patriarchy, like the fear of a woman being too powerful. So where does that come into this picture?
Okay, so that's an interesting question, because you see, it depends, like when you say a woman is too powerful, or when they say that power is a patriarchal power. Like the definition of that power is a patriarchal power, which is like ranked and, you know, like hierarchical. And if you win, someone else must lose, and you either go up, or, you know, all that stuff that we know about patriarchy, right? So they say powerful women. I suppose that all women are powerful in their own ways. You know, maybe they're not exactly by patriarchal definitions look powerful, but they are powerful. But even sticking with the patriarchal definition, then you see this is the idea that, oh, women are powerful, and so that's why they become scary. And that's why, there is all this opposition and all the rules and all the laws and everything, because they are scary objects. And I simply don't think that it's the case. You see, this is too simple of an idea, because the scared person is always the woman. Woman is not scary. Woman is scared. The fear is instilled in the woman, generation after generation, that if you dare to open your mouth, if you dare to make a move, if you dare to do this or that, then something catastrophic will happen. You see, so part of the getting into negotiation with patriarchy comes from the fear that women have in their bones. And then this formulation then somehow obscures something else that is very important, and that is the hate toward women. So you see, women are scared of the hate. Not that the hate is there because women are scary. You see how it's flipping?
Right.
Totally.
Because it is to the advantage of the patriarchal system to flip it.
Totally. So if we can make women as the scary objects, like what, okay, so you're scary, and that's why we have to defend ourselves in front of you. So we don't give you, permission to travel by yourself. Right. Your husband or your father should come and sign a document, and so we know that some man has allowed you to travel. You know what I mean? So this whole thing that, oh, you are scary and we are defending ourselves, it's all in the service of patriarchy. It's patriarchal discourse 160%. You see, the scared person, the scared party is the woman, and the hateful party is patriarchy. And let me emphasize, and I know that we're running out of time, but let me emphasize remind all of us what Bell Hooks says, that patriarchy doesn't have gender. So we're not talking about men as such. We're talking about patriarchy. So men or women can be patriarchal. Many, as Bell Hooks again emphasizes, many cases of child abuse happens as the result of mothers being patriarchs, And so we're not ignoring that part either.
So one last question before we stop, if you can just address in a minute. Can you say something about, as a psychoanalyst and as someone who is teaching therapists, how does this show up? And, I know we don't have a lot of time, but can you say something about what happens to a woman therapist working with a woman patient in this kind of environment?
Yeah, I get that in best case scenarios, they get involved into stretching the margin of bad enough for the woman patients, and in worst case scenarios, then what happens is that the therapist may be unaware of all these dynamics and all these complexities and ignore the whole thing, and then reinforcing the patriarchy again, trying to quote unquote tame the patient into some, behavior or something.
Great, thank you. I mean, clearly by your definition, it doesn't look like you are a good woman.
No.
Okay, so we can hand it over to Maria and questions at the audience.
I was wondering if we might take a few questions. I actually had one. I know you mentioned about the dynamics in the family and the importance of the relationship with the mother and her children. I was wondering about the relationship among women? And is there any support woman to woman or not, or the other way? So I was very curious about that.
Yes. So it depends. You see, it depends if women can be allied, like it happens that they can be allied against like their husbands or their parents, or like whoever they recognize as the agent of patriarchy, right? And so when they're allies, they are like very good to each other and still carrying some patriarchal values and stuff. But what happens is their relationship goes under benevolent sexism. You see, so they may give each other advices, they may support each other, all in the service of patriarchy, but it's benevolent sexism still. But then if they are not allied, like for each group of allied women, there are some other women who are whores, whatever. That's the best way that I can describe it. And from your smile, I can get that you got it. So if some women are identified as whores, then they will be subject to the cruel, malevolent sexism. You know what I mean? So they will be calling names. There would be, there would be all kinds of smear campaign, whatever. Like there will be going on.
And what about single women, or are there single women?
Yes, of course there are single women. There are single women, and what about them? What is your question?
Well, do they have more? Are they escaping some of this in a way by being single?
No, not necessarily. You see, something that I want to, now that you're saying, you remind me of this fact that I have recognized that there is some woman culture or friendship culture, like in American society. Like women have friends who are their besties, and then for their besties, then they will do anything or everything. You see, I can't say for sure that that kind of intensity and that kind of bestie exists in between women, because you see, like there's always this male gaze in between that interferes with the whole story. So everything depends on where they locate themselves in vis-a-vis that male gaze.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I imagine that family becomes more important than one-to-one female bonding, as I know in Indian culture as well, up to a great extent.
Yes.
Someone is asking a question about the impact of not being able to leave marriages for women and families. Like, what are the psychological, what is the psychological impact of being stuck and not being able to leave a marriage?
So of course it can be catastrophic, and of course it's happening every day. You see, so that's why we have so many somatic complaints, severe depression, even suicide rates, which is in terms of official statistics is covered. It will be announced like with under some disease or heart attack or whatever. But I mean, yeah. So I want to reframe that question as, are women dying under patriarchal pressures? And the answer is a definitive yes. They are.
And someone has made a comment that what you describe as owned sexuality, is this a sadomasochistic submissive sexual position? I'm not sure if this means that the person is asking whether this is the woman's sadomasochistic submissive sexual position. Or do you see it, I think what is meant here is, or do you see it simply as an externally forced, thing, or is there a sadomasochistic dynamic coming from the woman's side?
I don't think so. You see, like because labeling it with something like sadomasochism then is entering into the field of psychopathology, and so that's not what we're doing here. We are not identifying psychopathology. So I assume some women may become sadomasochistic, some not, but I cannot say that as like this general phenomena leads to women being sexually sadomasochistic. No, not necessarily.
There's another question here. If a mother is seen as an ally on the conscious level, how is she seen in the unconscious? And when that shows up as a negative transference with the female analyst?
So you see, the mother is is seen as a love object in both in conscious and unconscious level, you see. So, but then what happens in the analysis between if an analyst is a woman and the patient is a woman, then the transference, of course, carries all these stories that I was saying, and it depends where this pair, like where this matrix of transference, counter-transference then falls in this patriarchal value system. Like it all depends to the therapist's, consciousness and awareness of this whole dynamic, and to what to do with this thing, with this woman. I had recently I had a workshop with some therapists, and it was a pretty crowded workshop with more than 60 people enrolled, and I gave them an assignment and put them on breakout rooms, and the assignment was that for each group to come up with some fictionalized woman case that they are struggling in therapy. And all the therapists were psychoanalytic therapists, okay? So there were 10 groups in the breakout room, and they got back, and out of that 10 group, 7 groups had the fictionalized case of a woman in her 40s who's stuck in abusive relationship. You see? So then we got a chance to talk about how this is a common phenomenon, how they're all struggling with the same thing, because if that is the point that a woman needs to make a decision, needs to have a voice, needs to do something, and the therapist is stuck with it, because what does therapist do? So should the therapist force her to find her voice and go and then face all the consequences, or should the therapist back up and go, like we have an expression in Farsi, we tell to like not we, but I mean women used to tell each other, burn and endure. Meaning that whatever you're complaining, get back to your home, get back to your husband. It's okay if you're burning, endure it, and be a good woman. So this is a position that a therapist also can take, of course, not under burn and endure with some psychoanalytic jargon. We can stick to Freud's taboo of virginity, femininity, and all of that, and go with burn and endure and become that type of therapist. So
it's fascinating. Is there are there any men allies?
Good question. I don't know how many. How many I have seen, what is the skip button? Is there any skip button to questions? Like I can skip this question. I haven't seen that many, very few.
Well,
which may be a part of maybe a difference in where, let's say, American society or Western society is and where things are at, because I think that it's easier perhaps to find male allies now with feminist progress, than it might be in Iranian society. Right.
Definitely, right.
Unfortunately, we're reaching a time boundary here. I want to thank you both really for unveiling our vision of life in Iran. And also, I want to remind everyone that our meeting today and all of our meetings have been recorded, and you can find them on the Institute's YouTube channel. You can also put in the search Confronting Racism, Discrimination, and Othering, and you will find all of our events as well. And I hope that everyone will join us next month as we continue our series. Our guest will be Professor Stacy Leeds, who is a judge and a lawyer. She is the Dean Emeritus at the University of Arkansas School of Law and the first Indigenous woman to lead a law school. She was the first woman to serve as a justice of the Cherokee Nation Supreme Court. She is currently a Muskogee Nation District Court judge and an appellate judge for the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation. And she serves on several boards, including the American Indian Resource Center. Her topic will address the complex issues of identity in the Native American tribes' delay in granting citizenship to the freedmen, who are Black descendants of enslaved people. So I want to thank everyone, NAHALEH, Gurmeet, and all of our audience for joining us today. And we appreciate your participation and hope to see you next month. And in the meantime, be safe and be well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. Thank you. Thank you, Gurmeet.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.